Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Formative Summit. And my name is Craig Jones, and I will be our hype man today, although you will quickly find out that my guest is probably the real energy and fire behind this conversation. My title and role in education is I'm the co-founder and CEO of Formative, goformative.com. And before that, I taught 8th grade science for 4 years in South Los Angeles. Without further ado, though, I would like to introduce everyone here to Joe Marquez.
All right.
I've known for quite some time.
Yeah.
Joe is, he's done a lot in education, and he's currently an education strategist, which is quite the fancy title, but basically he's a teacher on special assignment for the whole West Coast. And I think he's really, if you've ever met Joe or heard him speak, just one of the most amazing people. So I'm honored to be able to do this session with him. His session today is going to be about allowing our formative assessments to embody a principle known as Tamasha. And he will quickly explain that to everybody, because I'm sure you guys are all curious about what Tamasha means. But kind of a subheading for his session is really making sure we know as educators how to reach all students in all modalities at the same time without making more work for the teacher or students. So without further ado, love to kind of make this conversational with Joe Marquez.
Absolutely. Hey, Craig, thank you so much for having me. You know, I absolutely love talking with you. And yeah, we've been friends for quite some time. And, I think it's that 8th grade science teacher vibe that we get, right? Because I was an 8th grade science teacher for 10 years. And then an instructional technology coach in my district for 4 of those 10. And so I think we just have that analytical side to our brain that just truly tries to figure out how to make teaching fun and exciting. And one of those things that really can transform the lives of students. And I'm super happy to be here with you. And I'm super excited to share my love of learning and my love of tools and how they can best help students learn and be engaged and just become better learners, but also for teachers to learn that technology shouldn't be feared. It should be embraced, and teachers should know that they are the biggest tool out there, right? I say that to my students all the time. Hey, I'm the biggest tool in this class. And I always get a good laugh. So teachers can really embody that they are the biggest tool in the classroom.
I love that. I think there must be something in the H2O for science teachers, especially middle school science teachers. A lot of people get into technology. I think there's so many different things you have to teach in 8th grade science that just kind of naturally leads you towards forcing some kind of technology in your life.
But it's funny because, I think what it is that you have these students who are just becoming more and more squirrely because they're just coming into their own, right? They've left the elementary school where they have one teacher, and they're learning that they can become their own person with their friends, and they're just all over the place, right? And one way to really capture their attention is to embody the tools they're already using outside the classroom, and technology is that tool. And so if we can capture that fire that they use outside the classroom and truly ignite it in the classroom, it transforms the way you look at teaching. And I think that's what technology did for me. I didn't go out looking at technology as something that I'm going to do. It found me because my students were begging for it. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to start using it. So I think you're absolutely right. There's something in that 8th grade air where technology just finds a way to make teaching more fun for us, but more engaging and more meaningful for the students themselves.
Couldn't have said it better. And I also think we might be slightly early adopters. I know you used to wear the Google glasses, and I was really big into kind of Google Forms and all these little, I taught myself how to code just so that we can build a website here. But at the same time, I think our passion is actually more in sharing it with others, which is probably why we became educators. So I am very excited to hear what you have to share that might help other educators, both at the top of the spectrum. We might be the early adopters, first one to try everything, but then people maybe who had that fear, and you can tell them to ditch it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, cool. Well, I would love to get to know more about your session. And probably take a little bit more of a passive role, but I'm going to pretend to be the audience here. So if I have any questions about what you're saying, I'm going to ask, imagining what people might be thinking about at home.
Perfect. Yeah. So let me go ahead and get started. The one of the most important things that you've actually touched bases on is having a growth mindset, right? And you're talking about us as being these early adopters. We kind of gravitate towards the technology because it's meaningful towards the kids. And even if we're not those early adopters, at least we have that mindset of being the part of the early majority. But what we really need to see is that smaller percentage, that 2.5 of innovators, right? How are you going to really tip that technology on its head to make sure it's meaningful and beneficial to all students? And I kind of want to go back to your statement about saying, when I was wearing Google Glass, I didn't buy Google Glass to be like, ooh, it's the new fancy thing. I had an idea behind that purchase. And the idea was, how can I utilize Google Glass as a back channel into the mind of my students while we are discussing a certain topic? And I was always finding that I had a lot of students who would not raise their hand to ask a question. A lot of students who were passively listening and not being part of the discussion. Maybe some EL learners who wanted to ask a question, but they were fearful that their accent or they didn't have a quite grasp of the English language to string together a sentence, that they felt they couldn't be part of the class. And so what I actually did was I took those Google Glass and I attached them to a Twitter feed for my students. And we started to do something called Twitter in the classroom and Marquez Science. And so the feed actually went through my eyepiece. And so when a student had a question, instead of raising their hand, they would tweet at me. And I would see their question in real time, and I would be able to answer it in real time without them feeling like they were being singled out. So that's what I'm looking at with these early majority and early adopters, and then going over to the innovators, finding a way to use it to fit your students. And it's that excitement to me that I really found beneficial in my teaching. How can I transform my classroom? And I always asked myself this question. I always asked myself, would my students still be in my classroom if they didn't have to be there? If after attendance was taken, if there was no repercussions of getting up and leaving, how many students would still stay because they found it meaningful to them? And I always tiered my lessons towards that. And a lot of people say, there's no one size fits all in teaching. And that's absolutely true. That's why we have to find and utilize technology that's so malleable that you can embed things into it that truly meets the needs of all types of learners, visual learners, auditory learners, tactile learners. All those things need to be rolled into a lesson. And no matter if you're an English teacher, a science teacher, a social studies teacher, all of these things need to be able to be accessible to the students so they have a pathway to have their voice heard. And so when I start looking at all this stuff, I get excited. And I actually heard a term a while back called Tamasha. And I heard this term in one of the most unlikely places. It was a documentary for cricket. And don't ask me how I started watching this documentary on cricket. It's just a long stay at an airport one night. And I found out that India wanted to find a way to take this British game and make it their own. Take this British game that could last up to 5 days and truly make it a faster paced game where a younger generation can grasp it. And they turned it into this thing called T20 cricket. And they say now it is called Tamasha, because they mash it up with a Bollywood style atmosphere. And they say now cricket in India is fun and exciting and important, but also uncertain with an outcome that they don't know towards the end. And they say that's Tamasha. And when I heard that, I'm like, that's teaching. That's the way teaching has to be. You have to have fun while you are teaching. Now, that doesn't mean every day you're going to walk in and be like the super excited teacher, right? It'd be awesome if you were. I mean, there's going to be times you're like, it's Monday and like, oh, how many more days till the weekend? Which, by the way, the answer to that is always 5. There's always 5 days until the weekend if it's Monday. But you need to have that air of fun no matter what. Because if you're not having fun, if you're not happy to be there, if you're not excited that you have an opportunity to change the world on a daily basis, if that's not you, then maybe we should look for something else than being a teacher. You also have to bring excitement into the classroom. Excitement doesn't mean you have to jump on your desk and scream at the top of your lungs or be this entertainer. Excitement means that you're making learning meaningful to the students now. That's where you ask yourself, is my lesson exciting enough to keep them on the edge of their seats to want to hear more? And what that also means is you have to make sure your lesson is important to them now. I remember when I was in a 7th grade math class and I was asking, why do we have to know this? And they go, well, in 20 years, you're going to blah, blah, blah. I don't care in 20 years. I want to care now. How is this affecting me now? And then finally, and I think this is one of the most important things, is uncertainty. As a teacher, you don't have to be certain your lesson is going to work. You don't have to be certain that you know how to use a tool 100% perfectly. You don't have to be certain at all. You just have to be willing to try. And so I think a portion of uncertainty is incredibly important when you're looking at teaching in the classroom. And I always emphasize to teachers, teaching, a great teacher doesn't mean perfect teaching, right? A great teacher is somebody that loves what they're doing, makes it meaningful and important to their students, and tries new things to make it relevant for them. That's Tamasha. And that has been my rallying cry for these last 2 months. How can we embody Tamasha in the classroom to make a transformative change, to make sure that we are changing the lives of our students on a daily basis? How can we do that? And when I look at this, I look at this saying, ditch that fear. And this came about through a conversation I was having with my buddy Matt Miller on why do we think, some educators are fearful of dipping their toe into technology? Why do we think that some educators are not trying new things? Is it because they're so used to doing what they've always done? Is it because they deem themselves not a techie, so they don't even want to try? How can we get teachers to ditch that fear? And, that's a question a lot of teachers on special assignments have to deal with. That's a lot of questions that administrators have to deal with. But, one of my eye-opening conversations that got me open to how we can help this progress was in my Sunday church service. I have a great pastor who always tries and makes the word relevant to our daily lives. And there's one thing that he said in one of his sermons that really stuck to me. He says that we all come to a point in our lives where we have a moment where we can make a difference. We have a moment that can change the lives of ourselves, change the lives of our family, change the lives of our community. We have this moment. And when that moment happens, when you have to make a decision, we can either be paralyzed by what we deem as our weaknesses, or we can be empowered by what we already know are our strengths. And what I take of that is, it's when something stands in the way, we can say we're not very good at this, but if we can look at what we are good at, the weaknesses fade away. So when teachers say, I'm not good at technology, I ask, well, are you good at teaching? And they're like, well, yes. Then be empowered that you're a phenomenal teacher. And if the technology doesn't work, who cares? Because you're now empowered by just your phenomenal experience of classroom management, classroom engagement. You are a great teacher. That should overshadow everything. And when you look at it that way, trying new things doesn't seem that big of a deal. Trying new things seems like a natural progression to becoming even more empowered by even more strengths. And I think that's what we need to see when we are learning new things or trying new things. Don't worry if the tech doesn't work, right? Because we can still fall back on what we already know to be true, and that is our phenomenal experience as educators in this world. Because that's what we're here for. We're here to change the world. We're not just here to teach standards. We are here to change the entire face of this world because we are creating the future of our society, and they deserve a teacher willing to try. And just one last thing with this, this relates to a passage in the Bible that really sticks with me, and that's Matthew 14:25. And in this passage, it has Jesus walking on water in the wind and the waves, and he calls out to some of his disciples and says, "Hey, come towards me." And because they see Jesus doing it, they believe they can. So they get out of the boat and walk on water as well. But the moment they have fear, the moment they think they can't do it, they fall right through that water. To me, what that means is we have to find that fellow teacher at our school, that fellow teacher in our community that's already trying these things, and latch onto them, lean on them, see them as that person you can follow, and know that if they can do it, you can do it. And that's what teaching is. It's a community of learners willing to try and learn from each other to help everybody else out. And to me, that's what really embodies how we can truly try new things. By understanding teaching is a collaborative sport. We are not in it by ourselves. We need to be able to follow each other and learn from each other so that we can best enable our students to be the best citizens, the best collaborators, and the best learners they possibly can. And one last thing I always say to teachers, because some teachers listen to that, they go, "Oh, that's great. I wish I would have heard that years ago. I'm going to retire in 3 years, and it's going to take me 3 years to learn all this stuff. So if it's going to take me that long to learn, why should I do it? I can just eke out these last 3 years and not have to worry about it." And I always come back to a statement that I thought about a while ago, and that's, you may have seen thousands of students in the history of your career. Every year, more and more kids come through your halls and more kids sit in your seats. But every year at the beginning of the school year, that's the first time those kids get to see you. That's the very first time they're sitting in your seat. They don't look at you and go, "Oh, you've seen 1,000 kids." They look at you and say, "What can you do for me? How can you get me out of my shell? How can you make me a great learner?" Because of that, they deserve the best you that they can possibly get, not the you 1 foot out the door. They deserve the you willing to try new things every day so that you can make them a better student. We need to start looking at ourselves as lifelong learners. If we don't already do that, we need to start looking at ourselves that way. And we need to see every year the same way that we saw our first year of teaching, not knowing if the lesson's going to work, not knowing if the students are going to grasp onto what you're saying. That uncertainty, that part of Tamasha, is what breeds innovation, because that's what makes us search how to reach those unreachable students. And I think that's what sometimes we forget. It's not about reaching the kids that can get it on their own. It's about reaching those kids who already think education is worthless to them. It's about reaching those kids that have never met that teacher that grasped what it really takes for them to understand those students. And when you finally hit that nerve of that student who's never truly had that teacher that could reach them, when you see on their face that they are actually enjoying learning for the first time, that's worth $1 million right there. Knowing that you have changed somebody's mind and changed their future because they now know education does have a purpose in their life. And that's what we need to be looking at as teachers. That's why we need to ditch that fear. That's why we need to make sure we are trying new things on a daily basis, because our kids deserve that kind of teacher.
Couldn't agree with you more. I love hearing you speak. One thing I want to just add to that is when you showed that first growth mindset chart, I used to think of it like this, where only maybe 2.5% of people are innovators, but I think educators tend to skew even more. I think there are a lot of innovators in education. I can't tell you how many I've met that have started their own tech companies or are leading charges at their school or putting together conferences like this, or summits or that kind of sort of thing. It is an incredible place to be. And so you might not think that you are in the early majority, but you probably are. I think educators tend to skew that way, and I also think students are kind of on the forefront of most of these curves. And so a lot is possible in the classroom. And so I get really excited when you talk about that, and I love hearing about Tamasha. I think it's a perfect kind of synonym of what teaching really is. So that's awesome.
That's good. And I love that you talked about students, because I think they are incredibly skewed towards the innovator portion of this, right? And that's another thing that should allow us to be very excited about trying new things, because even if we don't know how to use it 100%, the kids will figure it out. And the kids will show us new things as well, which is great. I love when kids go, hey, you can do it this way. I'm like, I didn't know that, and now I do. Thank you. I appreciate that. I love it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
People, when we would first kind of talk to people about building Formative, they're like, it's got to be tough to build for classrooms because they might not have the internet, or they might not have the latest internet browsers. And it's like, if you look at just even graphs of how people use Safari or Chrome, educators actually tend to have the most updated things. And I don't know, the proof is actually there that we are in an industry that is at the forefront. It might have taken a little longer for devices to get into the classroom versus at home, but now that they're in the classroom, or that they're becoming in the classroom, the pace of innovation and just adoption in the classroom is really exciting. So hopefully everybody in this summit is on board and is willing to get everybody they know on board too.
Absolutely. I always say that excuses are the killer. Excuses are the killer of innovation, right? When I first started talking about using Twitter in my classroom to allow for a conversation to happen that wouldn't normally happen, a lot of people said, well, what if you start using this in the classroom and kids misuse it? What if kids are using this in the classroom and they're doing wrong things? What if? And I go, well, you know what? What if they're using it and they finally feel they belong in your classroom? What if they start using it and they truly feel that they have a voice now? I always say, what if, and add something amazing, and it completely changes your mindset on why you definitely have to use and start integrating technology in the classroom. So I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah. What if this is now the best year of your history of teaching? I mean, it probably will be. I think usually better things happen for those who take those risks.
Absolutely. And a lot of teachers ask, well, there's so much technology out there, where do I start? Or there's so much technology out there, how do I know if it's going to work in my classroom? And I had those exact same questions. And so I started thinking, well, what do I want out of a technology? Not, just various technologies, just in general. And I came up with this model that I've been using for the past 5 years called inspect, redirect, make correct. And I kind of put every new tool that comes across my desk up against this model. And what it means is, at any moment, I should be able, if the tool is beneficial, at any moment, I should be able to inspect student work. Not after they've turned it in, not the next day, not over the weekend after I've graded something, like right now. Like at this exact moment, I want to see how they're doing on question 1, or I want to see how they're doing on passage 1. Can I see that happening in real time? And secondly is redirect. If I notice that the majority of the class is skewing off on a tangent, or if I notice the majority of the class has an idea wrong, I want to be able to stop the entire class and redirect them towards the correct path. Not give them the answer, but maybe on the screen show them how they're going off on the wrong route, how to redirect them towards the correct path. And then finally, the technology should allow the teacher to give the students time to make those corrections before the class is over, or at least before the assignment is considered due. And what I find is, when students hit done, or when students hit submit, or when students take a paper and drop it in the turn-in bin, they're done. They like wipe their hands and go, whatever happens, happens. And you can write up on that paper. You can leave comments all over the place. You can do all those things. But in the mind of the student, I'm done with that assignment. If it's not done, if it's not marked as done, if it's not turned in, if it's a continuing growth area, the kids and students are more willing to make those changes, which then they're more willing to see those changes happen in their mindset. And so that's what I put through all my technology. That's kind of the path. Can I inspect? Can I redirect? And can I make correct? And we've had this conversation before because I put formative through this exact same rigor. And it hit every single one of those. And I think it actually does the best job at the inspect portion, because everything they do in real time is being seen by the teacher. And that's extremely important, which leads me to the next question. And it's, what is the purpose of your activity, right? Why are you using this technology in the classroom? You shouldn't just use it to use it. There has to be a purpose. I always tell teachers, I go, if you're having your students write notes and then now you have computers so you have them type it, just have them write it. There's no purpose in having you type it. There has to be a transformative purpose. So you have to first identify, what is the purpose of your lab? What is the purpose of your lesson? What is the purpose of your activity? And after you understand the purpose, the essential question and the learning outcomes, what is the intended outcome of the students for this activity? And I think this is incredibly important, because a lot of times we rely too much of the importance on the grade. I want to make sure that they get at least an 8 out of 10. Well, what does that mean, right? For me, a lab has nothing to do with the grade. It's, can you take information based upon the essential question and come up with a comprehensive, critically thought out answer based upon evidence to answer that question? To me, you can't put points on that. And so, like, whenever I do an activity, the purpose is, do they show growth from the beginning of the activity to the end? We put way too much importance on the point value, not on the learning outcome. And then finally, am I meeting the needs of all students? I mean, think about it. If traditional labs in science are done on worksheets or printed labs, and all the students are doing is reading and answering in pencil, or reading and doing the lab physically and then writing on pencil, what if your students, their learning need is not, they get hung up on the reading or the wording or the questions, and they get stuck? You're not reaching that learning outcome, that need of all the students in your classroom. So how can you fit all these questions into your lesson and answer them all at once? That's what I want to kind of answer today. And then finally, when I'm showing this, I want to make sure everybody knows, Formative is not a digital worksheet creator. I see a lot of people making formatives and they're turning them into just these auto-corrected digital worksheets. And maybe that's a good step in the right direction, but we have to know that's not the end all be all. There has to be that next step. We have to be able to augment it. We can't just have it, moved over, a substitution from a handwritten paper to a digital paper, but it's now auto-graded, so I get better results. We should be able to change that. What technology should do is make the impossible possible. If the technology in the hands of your students is not being used to make what was previously impossible possible, don't use the technology. We need to focus on that learning outcome. And we need to allow for students to understand that the outcomes of worksheets, it needs to allow that what we're doing completely changes what turning in a worksheet to a turn-in bin can do. Completely changes that around. And then finally, within the lesson, we need to allow for true interaction. We need to allow students who are fearful of raising their hands or asking a question or doing that kind of stuff, means of interacting with the class in the best way they know how. How can we get teachers to talk to more students to talk to more teachers, and students to talk to more students? So I just want to briefly kind of go over how I can take a formative that kind of only meets the worksheet idea and really brings it into a truly interactive lesson to meet the needs of all students. And as we're going through this, Craig, if you want to stop me, if you want to ask me some questions, please.
Yeah.
I truly want that to happen.
Well, I will
So
say just a little backstory, just real quick before we go into this assignment is when Formative was created. I don't know if I get to tell this story very much. Um, I would have my students always just answer all their assignments on Google Forms and then use clicker systems. But probably the very first Formative that ever existed was just because I thought my lab that I was doing was stale. It was a little bit too much like, okay, measure the temperature of this, plot the point, do the graph, and then maybe you'll come up with the conclusion at the end. But I just felt like it could be so much more real time and interactive and engaging, and actually know that the student got the aha moment, not that they looked over at the student to the left of them and kind of understood what the conclusion of the lab was supposed to be. And so just when you described the way that you did that, I think it probably is very similar to where you're about to go with this, which is just I thought of the purpose of what I really wanted the students to get and the outcome that I was really hoping for them to have. And I just wanted to make sure that I could see that aha moment as it happened and not just like assume that it was going to happen. That's kind of how Formative came about. And I think my students really appreciated it. They loved my class as a result of it because they knew that I knew that they got it. And if they didn't, they knew that they wouldn't just have to nod their head and imagine that, okay, I can just walk out the room. They really understood why they were in class. So anyway, I'd love for you to share that, but I just felt like you really resonated with me when you described that Formative is definitely not a digital worksheet, although it is a stepping stone for some people who maybe have never even entered into this area, but you can do so much more.
no, absolutely. You know, and I like to say, you know, Formative is one of those gateway tools, right? Mm-hmm. It's you know, at when you first start dipping your toe in, it's like it's nice. You know, it feels good because you can add text and you can add questions and you can see all that happening in real time. But when you look up, you notice you're not just dipping your foot into a kiddie pool, you're dipping your foot into an ocean, and there's so much more out there that can be brought in. And that's kind of what I want to do. I want to crack this nut open and show you how you can truly meet the needs of all learners in one singular location. And for me, that's key to this. Yeah. Yes, you can do all of this stuff through maybe a Google Classroom. You can say, after your lab, go here, after your lab, go there. But I find when it's more streamlined, when it's all located in one location, the students are more willing to do more work to make sure they are understanding the material. So one way that I did this was through, well, number one, making sure every single one of my labs has a real world example. And so like I did a lab called Inertia and Mass, where we have kind of like a tube and we drop different mass marbles down and they rate how long it took to get down to the bottom. And then it has a curve on the bottom and how far does it go up? And it's a relation to inertia and mass. Well, the kids don't care about that. But if I can relate that to those runaway truck ramps that they see on the freeway all the time, that they don't really understand what it's for and they don't know how it works, if we can relate it to something they see on a daily basis, then we have a connection. And so, you know, bringing those in and having them answer that essential question, not by the end of this, you should know what inertia and mass is. It's by the end of this, why are those ramps there? And how can small tweaks to those ramps help make them even better? Then I truly know they're understanding that material. And one of the first things I love doing is having students self-read and then share out what they've read with their group members. And so we started doing something called an annotated jigsaw. And so what we would do is, in Formative, we would bring in a background image as our assignment. So I would have kind of a reading material that I would have for the student. So let's say that I'm bringing in, let's see if I can find it. It's here somewhere. Right here. So let's say I want my students to annotate over this. Now they can. And what the kids would do, if you can see, is it says, for 3 minutes, you're going to read your section, because they divvy it up, your section by yourself. You're going to annotate. You're going to underline. You're going to highlight. You're going to write little notes off to the side about what you want to share. And then after those 3 minutes, each group member takes 3 minutes to share what they've read. And by the end, this one pager has been split up into 3, and the kids are kind of hearing each other's thoughts about their idea of inertia and mass. And so bringing in kind of digital inking into the lab at the beginning, starting that conversation process, is incredibly important. And I think the part that's incredibly important is tactilely being able to write and dictate your thoughts on the paper itself, but also share out within the group. I'm a huge proponent of blended learning. It should not all be done encapsulated in technology. You still have to have those moments of face-to-face communication to truly understand the material. But now that they've done this, how do we truly know they understand what a runaway truck ramp is? Maybe they have never seen that before. I love bringing in videos that help us understand what that is. And so one of the videos I would find would be a runaway truck ramps by Caltrans or some state agency about why and how they build these things. And just by grabbing that link right there, I can easily come in, write down and tell the kids, watch this video so that you can understand this a little bit more. And I'll tell you right here, my favorite feature in Formative is this embed tool. This truly changed my idea of Formative. And I just paste it in and boom. Oh, sorry, I forgot the embed portion. I grabbed the wrong one.
You can do either, but yeah, for the embed, it's this one.
And so you just have this video now of that actual creators of the runaway truck ramps about why inclines are important, why putting gravel down off the road is important. They tell you all of this stuff. Now, another way around it is also maybe you want to ask questions along the way of that video, right? You can throw that video and then embed the ed puzzle. Completely up to you about how you want to do that. But what this does is it makes that connection between the jigsaw, the essential question, and then a real world application of that as well. And I think that's incredibly important because we are hitting all those modalities: visual, auditory, tactile, reading, writing. All those things are happening before the lab is even started, right? And then finally, now I used to demo what the lab should look like in front of the class. And you know, Craig, you being an 8th grade science teacher, just demo it in class, what does that normally result in when the lab actually starts?
I'm doing exactly what you do, but not understanding why.
Exactly. Or relying on one person in the group who paid attention and the others just watching them do it.
Yeah, someone in the back row is going to have a hard time seeing that one unless you have like old document camera set up. It's a little hard.
So what we started doing in our department is each teacher would record what the lab setup should look like. And in Formative, I asked a question. Do you understand how to set the lab up? Do you understand the procedures? Do you understand the video? Do you understand what you are doing? And I can see it coming in real time. Yes, I understand. Or if they mark no, I know those exact students who don't understand what they're doing, and I can go and help them immediately. If they don't understand, they can ask their partners, or they can post their question as a short answer right in the Formative. And notice the points for this are 0. There's no points for this. It's to make sure you are ready to start the lab. You are ready to start the project. This setup process is incredibly important to make sure that you're checking for understanding that they know what they are doing. And then I always like to bring in, well, what if they don't know? Yes, they can raise their hand and call me over and ask me some questions. But once again, those shy kids aren't going to do that. So if they don't know, if they marked no, how are they going to better grasp the material? And that's where bringing in presentations are incredibly important. And right here, what I did is I brought in a Nearpod. Same exact way. I was in my Nearpod account. I clicked on student paste lesson, and then I grabbed the embed code, just like that. And as simple as you can snap your fingers, you just click on that plus, click on embed, and paste it in. And now you have a walkthrough tutorial, a re-teach of what forces and motion and inertia are all about. I'm trying to put the power of the lab, the power of the learning in the hands of the students. and not relying on me as the teacher to give them their answer. I'm trying to leave little breadcrumbs along the way to really empower their learning as we're going through this. And then, of course, we have our materials and we have our formative questions, our short answer questions, stating your hypothesis, which are incredibly important along the way. But once again, the power in this comes in during the lab. Can you see learning is happening now? Just like the story that you had is not wait till they've left and hope they understood the lab. Can they show you during the lab they are understanding? And one of the things that I love doing is creating a social media like atmosphere in all classroom activity. Can they post pictures of what they're doing? Can they post videos of what they're doing? Can they explain what they're doing? Can they share their aha moments in real time? And one of the best ways to do that is through Padlet. And so what I did was I created 2 different Padlets for all my labs. I create a lab back channel. And what this does is it allows the students to ask questions. Hey, I'm stuck on question 2. Can anybody point me in the right direction? It can allow for students to post resources. Hey, I found this on YouTube that helps explain this concept a little bit better. It allows students to post aha moments. I just got this. I understand this now. It allows them to have this back channel conversation while the learning is happening, to show excitement for that learning. And then I also post what I call a social media wall. And a social media wall allows the students to post pictures and videos of the lab actually happening, right? By clicking this plus button, they can take a picture with their computer, they can record a video with their computer, and they can post that real-time learning, those real-time excitements while the lab is happening. Now, see, they could post this in Google Classroom and then they can toggle between the two, but with the power of the embed function, you can post those right in to your formative in real time. They have a question, boom, post, and it posts it to that channel. They have a picture, boom, click, post the picture. Now it's in that wall. Not having them leave the ecosystem, but remaining in the ecosystem allows the students to more likely use these features along the way. And I do have to say really quick that if you are interested in using something like this, when you embed, it gives you a crazy embed that looks like this. And that does not work in the formative. You have to find where it says iframe and then go down to where that iframe ends. And that's all you take. And then once you take that, you can come in to where you want to paste it and click on that plus. Once again, embed is your friend and paste it in. And now you have your progress wall right there. And I'll tell you, this right here truly transformed the way my labs worked, because I would have this posted on the classroom projector and the kids would see all their pictures and comments and videos posting on this wall, kind of like a tweet wall that you'd see at a conference. And the kids loved it. And more kids started using it. And it really got me to see the lab action in real time and collect that documentation of learning. And the last thing I want to share is the conclusion, because, and I know you can feel my pain on this. After doing an amazing lab like this and seeing all this learning happen, there's nothing worse than seeing a conclusion that says, I dropped marbles down a thing and they went up. I mean, you're like, but you know so much more than that, right? I mean, it's like you see all this enjoyment but you see the big reveal and they don't meet your expectations, or they don't know how to put into words what they actually learned. And I truly think that's what is really happening when we're asking kids to finalize their conclusion or write a summary of what they've done. It's not they didn't learn something. They don't know how to pull that learning from their brain and write it in words. And what needs to be done is a conclusion utilizing the multiple ways students communicate. So yes, still have your students write their conclusion. still have them write them out. And then, with this feature of having keywords keyed into their conclusion, I mean, phenomenal. So you can see that if they're going to write a great conclusion, they have to have the word Newton. They have to have the word inertia. And by having those keywords now finally being factored into kind of the point system, I think that really helps the teacher understand who's getting the answer and who's not. But what I also want to share with everybody is Formative's recording feature. Formative's recording feature, when you have the kids write their conclusion, type it out, but also say, okay, once you've typed it, now I want you to record what you wrote. It changes the game. They listen to what they wrote and they're like, well, I didn't really answer the questions. I didn't really verbalize what I wanted to do. It encouraged the kids to go back and rewrite their conclusion. It encourages the kids to listen to their thoughts in a different way, not just reading it with their eyes, but hearing it with their ears, to be like, that's not what I was trying to convey in my conclusion. Let me go back and rewrite it and then come back and re-record it. That really transformed the way these labs were concluded, because the conclusion, the written portion, became so much better after they had to verbalize it. And then sometimes you have to bring out the big guns. Sometimes you have to not only just have their voice being recorded so that you as the teacher and them as the student can hear it, but you got to have them have equity in that lesson. And what that means is you're going to record it and we're going to see your face, and everybody else in the class is going to be able to watch and listen to you. Now they're like, uh-oh, I better really put my best foot forward. And by doing this in Flipgrid, and then you grab that share and that embed feature, you can now directly embed a recordable answer of that conclusion right here, right from your formative. And I'll tell you what, you have kids that would spend 5 minutes of writing a conclusion, and now they're spending 45 minutes on it. And maybe 5 minutes fixing their hair and doing their makeup. But still, they're going in there and they're rewriting their conclusion. They're going in and recording their Flipgrid. They're listening to it. I don't like it. They're going back and rewriting it. It's this feedback process, this feedback loop that they get in on their own, because they want to put their best foot forward, because they are on camera. And I want you to understand that all of these things have a purpose. I'm not throwing these bells and whistles just so there's, hey, look, I use this and I use that. I want to make sure that all learners have the ability to learn, that all learners have the ability to share their voice, and that all learners have back channels to ask questions and learn at their own pace. And by embedding all these features, we are enacting that. We are allowing all learners to have access to that learning process. And in the end, your labs become more interactive. Your labs become more of a capsule of learning. But once again, they still fit in that inspect, redirect, make correct model that we really need to strive when looking at technology within the classroom.
Wow. I mean, I'm speechless on that. That was amazing. When I first had my initial labs, I think this is even beyond what I dreamt of when I was doing it in my classroom. So I literally just cannot believe how amazing that is. Also, I feel like while you're saying you don't really need to focus on the standards at all times, you really have the ability to even tag the standards and then track the different labs that you do over time to see how students are growing on standards or concepts. So we've made this tool to be powerful, and some people, I think, maybe they just upload a worksheet and digitize it. But the fact that you can get to this level and we can use your feedback to keep making formative even better, it's really incredible. So thank you so much for sharing that, Joe.
Of course. And thank you for having me today. And I just want to, speaking to all the educators out there, I just want to say that you are the most important people in this world, right? Besides the students in your classroom, right? You are the most important people in this world, because you are fostering the growth of the next generation of leaders. You may be the only adult figure in their lives that they see on a daily basis. You are the only person that can make learning meaningful. That is why you have the most important job in this world. And in fact, teaching is not a job. Teaching is a calling. Teaching takes special people put in special places to do special things. And when you're given the opportunity to make a difference, when you are given the opportunity to better yourself, I implore you, do not say no because of what you deem to be your weaknesses. Be empowered by your awesomeness as an educator. Be empowered by the role that you are going to play in molding the lives of kids who may not be, who definitely will be better off having met you. Understand that you are a difference maker, and that requires you to ditch that fear, become a community member with each other, and to make sure that you are sharing everything that you are doing with as many people that you can reach. Because teaching is a collaborative sport. And we have to remember that those students sitting in your seats, they don't belong to you. Those students are not your students. Those students are all of our students. And if you can affect more than those kids in your classroom by sharing your amazing work and your amazing energy with everybody who'll listen, we as a profession will be much better off for it, because you are amazing. And I want every single one of you listening to understand how amazing you are.
Wow, Joe, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining for another Formative Summit presentation. Joe, that was absolutely amazing. If we could, I'm sure you'd have a standing applause in it. Appreciate everyone who could make it here.
Thank you so much. And just one last thing. If you ever want to get in contact with me, my website is sonsoftechnology.com. Make sure it's .com, because sonsoftechnology.org is a biker gang in Austin, Texas. Very big difference in websites. And then you can also get a hold of me on Twitter at Joe Marquez70.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.